Heidi's going to start us off tonight. So there's a couple housekeeping items. Someone asked me to remind them to turn their cell phone off tonight because apparently they forgot once. So if it would embarrass you if your cell phone rang, please turn it off. If
Mine's
your
way
cell
louder.
phone rings, I'm not going to be upset about it. We are recording only this part of the presentation, the audio and the visual, so please don't worry about that. And we will share that with everybody after. This is who we are, and again, who we are. So I will let Heidi take it away because I think it's really important that we start this off with the emotional pieces of tonight.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I don't know if we're going to keep it on that or you're going to bump me ahead. Okay. So just echoing Crystal, it's not an easy topic and it's also not an easy time. And I'm hopeful that being here gives you some feeling of being less alone, and also that there are, of course, others that are going through the same thing. It wasn't my lifelong dream to become a divorce coach. I, of course, went through a divorce of my own that was full of lots of twists and turns. And what I did notice along the way was that there was a lack of support in certain areas that you really need. So you've got your legal professional that is there to represent you and advocate for the law and get you your best outcomes as it relates to the law, which Madison is phenomenal at doing. You've got your financial people that are going to help you, but who really is there in those moments where you're trying to figure out what you're going to do next? And that could be if you need to separate, if you've just been presented a separation, if co-parenting isn't going as well as you thought it would. I'll use this example. If you just want peace, but you don't know how to get there, and there's not that person to just sit with you or walk beside you and have the skills and the experience to be your unbiased, non-judgmental thinking partner, and really empathize with whatever stage you're at. So the way that I've designed my practice for my clients and I feel really connected to is that filling those gaps that are real. It's one thing to say, I'm going to help you with your emotions. We're going to get organized for the process. We're going to make sure that you're prepared legally or for any meetings. But it's another to say, you got a nastygram text and it's 10 o'clock at night and your head blows off because your emotions have completely overrun your brain and you can't calm down and you feel the need to defend. It's not going to get you anywhere, but you're going to do it anyways, and your kids see you upset. Who do you call? And you can call your friends and family. Of course, you need them, but you need that unbiased, non-judgmental, 30,000-foot glance at what you're going through to really talk you out of your tree, I say a lot, and make the best decision in that moment. And of course, we all have amazing friends and family that can help us with that. But we have to remember that they can only go so far too, and they're looking through everything through their lens, and they're biased because they want what's best for you. They might be judgmental. You never really know. And it's a lot for them to take. And when I think about my story and the churn of the endless conflict and trying to find my footing and not understanding why I couldn't, and my friends and family loved me, they cared for me, they cared for my kids, but there was only so much they could do. And so cut to later, when I decided to embark on this journey as a divorce coach, my goal was to really fill those gaps. So I think it's really critical to have someone that, number one, meets you where you are and is understanding and empathetic and skilled to get where you are and help you from that point, right? So that's kind of the role of me and what I do. And that is, obviously to ensure you feel heard and supported and you can make those next right steps. And sometimes it's just that small step, sometimes it's some larger steps, but it's talking through it with someone who really, truly understands the process and understands what you're feeling understands what's ahead of you and how you can remind yourself to take the steps that are good for you and set the stage for your best outcome. And so a lot of what we do is think together or feel together. Like I said, there are those moments with my clients that they get, a nastygram text, or they get a legal letter that came from left field, and they're feeling it all, and they're scared. They're feeling attacked, or they're not sure what they're supposed to do. And that's where you have that thinking partner to help you, feel supported, less alone, help you calm those emotions that are very real and true, and then help you make that next right step. And we really do work together to establish the way forward. Small steps, bigger steps, and get you back to making clear decisions. Because, obviously, from a psychological perspective, the brain cannot actually make any sort of informed decision when you're emotional. And that's biological. You get triggered, you see red, all the blood floods into your emotional brain. The logical brain is sitting there empty. You're not going to make any good decisions. So how do we feel supported to calm ourselves and actually move forward? And again, it's having that partner, and I partner with you all along the way to do those things, so that when you have to make those big decisions or small decisions, sometimes it's, I don't know if I can get out of bed. I can barely get my kids to school. Okay, no problem. Validation. How about we just try and have a shower today? Right? And feeling okay and coming out of those conversations with hope. And that's really what I established as the goal, is ensuring that my clients feel better every time we meet, whether it's, and I meet my clients over the phone, via Zoom, at the Blackfoot truck stop. I meet them at really crazy places. I talk to a ton of people in their cars. But the point is I am there to meet you where you're at, and it's not crazy. And I already had someone say to me, like, my situation, it's probably unique. And it's like, no, I've actually now heard it all, seen it all, experienced a lot of it myself. And so I really get what that feels like when you feel hope, even in those really dark moments. And then it allows you to be set up for success as you add in the people and the resources that you need for your team, which is including your legal professional and or your financial professional, setting you up for success for those interactions. And so oftentimes now Madison and I will introduce her to a client and other lawyers too, and set the stage and help the client get organized for that meeting, prepare emotionally for that meeting. Sometimes I'll support them through that meeting and be present. And Madison can then do her job and focus on that part of the divorce for the client, so they again feel supported, and then can come out of those kinds of interactions and meetings and have someone to debrief with and take the next step. So that's that. Oh, I missed that last piece, but that's okay. I can do it all in here. That's okay. So one of my personal things that I've embarked on in this role, as I've been doing it now for almost 4 years, is changing the conversation of divorce. And it's really important to understand that when you're facing having that conversation with your kids, your family, whomever, there's 52% of this population that is going through it. And we all come at divorce as it's a dirty word, or a broken family, or damaged goods, or whatever, right? And so what I have set out very holistically and passionately to do is change that channel, because guess what? Relationships change and people evolve, and sometimes they evolve together and sometimes they evolve separately. And to be able to call it, and now this is talking fairly streamlined and healthy, there's lots of different situations and scenarios, and we'll get into that, but to be able to call it for your own best interest is okay. And it is, we have to eliminate that shame piece in order to be able to move forward and rebuild our whole selves. And so part of what I do is also that is helping families try to shift from divorce is sad and awful, and a lot of times it is. Let's not kid ourselves, but how do we feel better about what's going to happen if we actually give ourselves the permission to know that relationships change, know that things change sometimes in life, there's no guarantees, and take that. And again, this has a million layers to it, but my point is for the kids, if you're going to have that conversation with the kids about getting divorced, how do you do it and do it well? And how do you catch the aftershocks and do that well? So we build resiliency in our kids and they understand that it's okay because half their class is got divorced parents or is at dad's house or mom's house or whatever, and it's not shameful. And so, again, this is all very basic and there's a lot of nuances, and I've seen a million situations. And all this to say, I want people to walk away from the broken family and the sadness and the shame and look at this from a shift and a point towards the whole self. And I really believe in that strongly because I think what we're going to do with the next generation when these kids are finding out that their parents are separating and getting divorced, they're actually going to build the skills to understand that relationships change. You don't want to compromise yourself for anybody. And it's okay. And we talk more about the logistics of the divorce and less about imposing our sadness. And now this is a whole nother seminar, so I'm not going to get into that, but I think it's really important for everybody to feel okay because you're not alone. You're not the only one. 52% of the population is going through it. 1 million women filed for divorce in the States last year. And I know we're in Canada, obviously, but I found that stat incredible. So if you think of those numbers and you think of those mothers and you think of those families, how do we shift the conversation to make them feel okay and ultimately build resiliency and skills in the next generation? Because I believe too, kids, we all say, oh, kids are resilient. No, they're not. That's why adults are all in therapy. Kids are not resilient. But we can build resiliency skills in kids. And this is how we do it. So I support a ton of families. I'm now having couples come to me asking to, whatever the Gwyneth Paltrow thing is, consciously uncouple. I didn't say that, but really that's what they're trying to do to be able to make sure that the kids are okay. And I know there's a lot of situations where that's virtually impossible, and we work through that too, but that also can translate into the person who is the safe, stable, loving parent to be able to carry that over to the kids and seal up those wounds and help them build resiliency skills. So I do a ton of that work too with families. And it's really refreshing to see the change and the result of these kids coming out of this going, we released the pressure valve. It's okay. The family's okay. Or I have parents reporting back, we had the world's greatest conversation. Yeah, it was shitty. Sorry. It was crappy. But and they're upset, and they're going to feel all their feelings, and we're going to go in their feelings with them. But all that to say, we're not imposing any emotions on them, and we're validating where they're at, but also moving them forward resiliently. So that's a whole nother topic, but I really feel passionate about that. And I know Madison and I have had a lot of conversations about that too, just changing the channel on that broken. No, it's just a shift. And yes, it's a shift into two homes. And yes, it's a shift probably, hopefully, but most likely at least one of you is going to be the best version of yourself for your kids. And they were only getting half of you because you were in survival mode in a relationship that wasn't working, right? So lots of conversations about that. And that's my role in a nutshell. But also I spend time threading the needle through all the other team members. And that's why I think I kicked it off and will hand the mic over to our fearless family lawyer.
Good evening. Can I stand? Am I allowed to stand?
Yes, you
the
are.
Camera people.
But just don't go in front of the speakers.
I'm quite short, so I don't know if it'll impact anything. Okay. So first, what do? A whole bunch of things that I'm not actually qualified to do. So my job is to provide you with legal advice throughout this process. What I often also end up doing is providing emotional support, financial guidance, and also just being a sounding board. And what's really important when you're looking for a family lawyer is someone that you can connect with on some level. We're not going to be your best friend. We're not trying to be your best friend, but you need someone who can hear you, reflect back to you what you're saying, and get you to your next step. And sometimes those conversations are going to be really difficult conversations, and they're going to be saying to you things that you don't want to hear. But if they are occasionally telling you things you don't want to hear, they're probably acting in your best interest. Because if you have a lawyer who's constantly saying to you, yes, 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 then they're probably not actually giving you the legal guidance you need to get through this process. Okay, so we're just going to do little family law 101. No legal advice, just sort of very high level, what does this look like? So when people first walk into my office, they say, do I have to divide my pension? What assets do I have? How do I know what assets do I have? And very basically, any asset that you have acquired from the date of marriage onwards is joint, whether it's in your name, his name, or both of your names. It is a joint asset, and it is divisible presumptively 50-50 on a relationship breakdown. If you had assets prior to the date of marriage, it's likely that if you can show what that asset was at the date of marriage, that you get to keep that as your exempt property at the end of this. So that gets carved out of the family division. Easy example, if you had an RSP with $10,000 in it on the day you got married, and it has $80,000 in it today, only $70,000 of that is divisible property. And that's really important to keep in the back of your mind. As you're going through this process, think about what you had and think about what you brought into the marriage, because you might be able to take that out of the marriage as your own property. Other things that are property that people sometimes don't realize are property. Businesses are property. Pensions are property. That's a hot topic. No one likes to divide their pension, but that is a piece of property and it is going to be divided. Okay? Next. Okay, switching gears, parenting. So when we're talking about parenting in the forum of divorce, we talk about two different things. The first thing that we talk about is parenting time, and people often conflate that with the term custody. Parenting time is the time that a child spends in each home. And that can look a million different ways. And I often have people coming into my office and saying, he wants shared parenting. I want shared parenting. I want sole custody. Whatever that looks like, your wish list of parenting isn't necessarily what you're going to get, because at the end of the day, the parenting that is going to come out of any agreement you sign is the parenting that is going to be in the best interest of your child. And there's a test that is set out in the Divorce Act that lists out what is in the best interest of your child. And then a judge will look at that if you and your partner are unable to reach an agreement between the two of you, and a judge will make a decision for you with respect to that parenting. The other piece of parenting, which is completely separate and apart from the concept of where the child sleeps every night, is the idea of decision making, formerly known as custody under the law. And that is your bundle of rights and responsibilities that you and the parent of your child, the other parent, share with respect to making big decisions for your child. So that is where your kid's going to go to school, what city your kid might live in if you two live in two different cities, what religion, whether your child is getting vaccinated or not. And if you two cannot agree on those decisions, you're going to have to go to a court to decide. So something that is really important to talk about with a lawyer when you first come into their office is what are your values that are shared and might be different than your partner when it comes to the parenting of a child, because those may become very relevant in this divorce process. Next, child support. Child support is directly related to parenting. Super broadly, people say, am I entitled to child support? I make more money than he does, but I have the kid in my care. He says he doesn't have to pay child support because I make more money. Not the case. Child support is the right of the child. You cannot contract out of it. You cannot say that he's not going to pay it because of this reason or that reason. Courts don't like it. There is a formula that is set up, and we plug in your income. We plug in how many kids you have, and we plug in who has the child in their care, and there's a number that gets spit out, and that is the number that you will receive or you will pay with respect to child support, and there's really no wiggle room there. So if you are afraid or you have concerns around what child support might look like, you can easily go online yourself, and there is a calculator. It's the Federal Child Support Guideline Calculator, Government of Canada website. You can plug in how many kids you have and your income or his income, and it will spit out what that person, based on their income, should be paying for child support. I highly recommend that you take a look at that. Don't try to guess. I see we have a question. I think we have to wait till the end for questions.
Are you going to touch on 7s and 3s?
Yes. Oh, no, apparently not. Go back. I will.
Okay.
Okay.
No problem.
So the child support that I was just talking about is Section 3 child support. I call it Section 3 because that's what it falls under the guidelines. The other child support that Crystal was just mentioning is Section 7 child support. Section 7 child support is over and above Section 3 child support, and it is additional funds that are paid between the parents to cover children's expenses over and above their basic needs. And those are things like medical and dental care that is uninsured, post-secondary expenses, and child care. So whether that's a nanny or daycare or whatever those look like. And those Section 7 expenses are paid in proportion to your income. So if you make 30% of the overall income between you and your former spouse, then you pay 30% of that child care. He pays 70%, or vice versa, depending on what those incomes are. Again, that is not really something that you can negotiate out of. If you two want to somehow reach a deal, sometimes that's okay. But if there's no deal reached, the default is certainly that is paid in accordance with the guidelines. Another question I get a lot on the child support is, what if he is self-employed? He has a business. His business makes $300,000 a year. He pays himself $20,000 a year. How do I deal with that? And the answer is that the child support guidelines set out a method of determining what someone's actual income is. And so we, as lawyers and the courts, do not look at what you're paying yourself. We look at what the overall gross income of your corporation is and what your reasonable expenses are. And then we create a formula to determine what your actual income is. So don't be afraid to say that is not your income. And don't be afraid to ask for the supporting documentation. If someone is self-employed, their line 150 income, which is that income you declare on your tax return, is not sufficient to determine what their income is for the purposes of paying child support. Okay. Spousal support. It's fun.
I see.
The most contentious area of family law. Property legislation says add it all up, divide by 2. Child support, it says here's the number of parents or children you have. Let's figure out who pays who what. Spousal support is more nuanced. And there's really 2 types of spousal support that you will see us talk about as lawyers. The first is compensatory spousal support. That is spousal support that you would think of in a traditional sense. So that is, I stayed home for 10, 15 years. I might have worked a little bit, done supervision at the school. I worked in the library at the school. I worked part-time nursing on a .3. But at the end of the day, I did the grocery shopping. I went to the appointments. I did the parent-teacher interviews, whatever that looks like. And he went out and he built his career. Maybe you moved to Vancouver for a few years in order for him to build his career. Whatever that looks like, if you primarily worked within the home and he primarily worked outside the home, there is a good chance that you could probably establish some sort of entitlement to what we call compensatory spousal support. The calculations with respect to spousal support are more complicated. I don't believe there's any online calculators that are available. And the reason for that is because the first threshold is figuring out that entitlement. And once that's determined, then we as lawyers can plug into a computer program something that gives us what the range of the dollar amount of spousal support might be based on your ages, the duration of your relationship, the ages of your children, your incomes, and your needs. Okay? So oftentimes what I hear when people come into my office is, well, he says that I don't get spousal support because he's been supporting me for 15 years and it's my turn to go out and make a living. I'm like, he just made your argument for spousal support for you. Cool. Thank you so much. But don't be afraid, right? That is really one that people get very afraid around. Whether you're entitled to it long-term or not, in that interim, in this stage where you are going through a divorce, which is going to take more than a year, 99% of the time, you're going to be getting some spousal support if you can show that threshold entitlement. Next is it's okay. We can go this. These are some of the factors that the court will look at. I went through some of them, but really it goes through the roles and responsibilities that you each assume during the marriage. Who was cooking dinner? Who was doing the laundry? Who was driving the children? With respect to the goal of self-sufficiency, which is at the bottom there. So depending on your age, your stage, and your education, the courts are going to say to you at some point, yes, you are entitled to support for 10 years, for 8 years, for 15 years, but that doesn't mean you're entitled to a support to a point where you are living the same lifestyle that you were entitled to or you enjoyed during the marriage. What that's saying is we're going to give you some money. It's going to be comparable to what his income is during the relationship because that's the lifestyle we were accustomed to. But at the end of the day, there's going to be a shift at some point where you're going to be asked to start to get a job, whether that's part-time or full-time, in order to supplement yourself. And the idea behind that is to eventually help you grow apart and to not have that string tying you and your spouse together forever. With that said, typical duration for spousal support, half the length of the marriage to the full length of the marriage. So that sort of helps you to understand where that would be for yourself. Truly, this is an area you need to get legal advice on. The number of people who come into my office and say, he says I'm not entitled, I don't want to ask for it. And then I start to go through it and I say, this is the most law school test proving spousal support I've ever seen. And people are just flabbergasted. And it's just about gathering information. Cost of a lawyer. People are afraid of lawyers because lawyers can cost a lot of money. What is important when selecting a lawyer is talking to that lawyer about your goals in your first meeting, about what your budget might be, and having them help you to understand the process. Ask lawyers about their billing practices. Ask them to explain how a 0.1 or a 0.2 works. Because lawyers, while they bill by the hour, they don't bill an hour for each hour they spend with you. They bill in increments of time based on how much time they spend with you up to an hour. Another important thing to remember is if you can often find a law firm that works in teams. So our law firm does it, but many do, where you will have a senior lawyer on a file, and that person will be overseeing the file. And then they will have junior lawyers who are copied on correspondence, who are working behind the scenes on your matter, who they can bill out at a much lower hourly rate. And that way you are getting a lot of the work done at a lower hourly rate, but you have that senior counsel on the file ready to step in if you need to go to court or ready to provide guidance when you need it. And that's another really important question to ask a lawyer in a meeting is what is your team approach? What type of mentorship do you have in your office? What can I do if I can no longer afford your hourly rate? Really important conversations to have. I often have people coming into my office and saying, how much is my divorce going to cost me? My answer is always, I don't know, because I don't. Your divorce could cost you 5 hours of billable time if you come in with everything settled and you draft a separation agreement. Highly unlikely. But what I can tell you is if these are the steps that we take, this is the range. If those are the steps that we take, that is the range. The unknown is your spouse. And that's where no lawyer can give you a true quote on what your legal fees will be because it happens to deal and be dependent on how your spouse is responding. But that's where I say, talk about team approach, talk about mentorship, and find a firm that is willing to do an approach where you have someone up the middle, at the top end, and at the bottom end working on your file at different times. It truly helps with the cost and helps get you the best service possible. I think that's everything. Ooh, questions, fun.
Some advanced ones. We'll go back to Heidi's.
Okay. Is there any risk to a person who's been separated for many years but not divorced? So this is important, actually. I'm tangled. Okay. So when you separate, the date that you separate is not the date that your property is valued for the purposes of division. The date you agree to divide your property and you reach that deal, or the date that you go to trial, is the valuation date. So that means if you have $10,000 in your RSP on the date you settle, on the date you separate, and then the date you settle, you have $20,000 in that account, it's that $20,000 that is subject to division, not that 10. So you do not ever want to wait 15 years to get a divorce. The other issue is if someone dies and you are in the middle of legal proceedings, two things can happen. One, if you have not filed the proper documentation with the court, your spouse is getting your assets. Two, if you have filed the proper documentation with the court, then your children or the beneficiaries of your estate are left to litigate the rest of your divorce with your spouse. So it's really important to try to move quickly on this.
I'm sorry.
Do not wait 15 years.
That shocked me a little bit.
You okay?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm good. Sorry, that one just really threw me. I'm
Shocking.
sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, this is not a good situation. Delay is not beneficial. This is a difficult one, and we see it on a lot of files, and frankly, I don't think it's becoming more prevalent. I think people are just talking about it more. So first and foremost, this is where you really need a team. And this is where I say, your lawyer is going to play a lot of roles for you, but at the end of the day, we're not trained to deal with intense emotional or physical coercion or abuse. That is where you want to have someone like Heidi, a divorce coach that you can work with, who can be your voice when you can't be that voice, but also you want to be seeking some professional help. You want to make sure that you have a psychologist on your team and someone else like who is a sounding board, who you can share information with and who you can use as a sober second thought. With respect to the question of how do we navigate it, we are now required under the Divorce Act to do domestic violence screening. So that is a conversation we have in all of our meetings. The Divorce Act also requires the judges to take domestic violence into consideration when they are looking at all aspects of a divorce file. In practice, it is something that we do struggle to tackle at different times throughout this process. But if you are communicating appropriately, which means over-communicating with your lawyer on the issues or the concerns that you have around coercive control, physical, verbal, financial abuse, then we are better equipped to deal with that. Your worst case scenario is not communicating those issues to your divorce lawyer because sometimes we're not able to identify it. And so we will ask the question, it is your job to give us that information. So please be honest and open as much as you can with your divorce lawyer. We are probably the safest person you'll ever talk to because lawyers can't tell anyone anything without your permission. Okay?
Does that also apply to mediators? Sorry,
No,
screening?
that's a good question. I don't know about mediators that are not lawyers. So mediators that are lawyers are required to do domestic violence screening prior to a mediation. Mediators who are not lawyers, I am unaware of whether they are required to do that or not. How does the age of the child impact the parenting arrangements? So on the very early stages, primary caregiver tends to maintain the status of primary caregiver in a separation. And so that's sort of getting a child to full-time school. And that's for a few reasons. One is attachment and what the psychologists say about attachment theory for young children. Two is practicality. Typically, if there's been a parent at home who has been the primary caregiver, then it's probably going to be that person continuing to be the primary caregiver because the other parent is off working, doing whatever else they were doing during the marriage. I occasionally have parents come into my office and say, well, I want shared week on, week off parenting. Okay? So what time does the child go to daycare? They don't go to daycare. Okay? What time's preschool start? 9 a.m. What time's preschool end? 11 a.m. Time does work start? 7:30 a.m. Time does work end? 5:30 p.m.? How are we picking and dropping up the kid from preschool? Hadn't thought about that. So in early stages, what governs a parenting arrangement is what's in the child's best interests, attachment style with the child, and also the practical pieces of how are you getting this child to and from his or her activities, preschool, that sort of thing. With respect to a child who is still nursing, a nursing child does not necessarily mean that you will be the sole parent of the child. It definitely greatly reduces the amount of time that the parent who is not the nursing parent is spending with the child. But I have actually seen cases where a judge has tried to direct a parent to pump in order to develop a parenting schedule.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Ooh. Well, thank you. That was exciting, informative. I appreciate it.
Heavy.
It is. I come in sort of in the beginning and then kind of at the end, because there's a lot of things that we've discussed tonight that I can't tell you. So I often will have people call me during a separation or considering a separation and asking me what they're entitled to in terms of child support and spousal support. And I cannot do those calculations for them. But what I can help with is helping understand what people need in terms of keeping themselves financially whole. So learning what kind of cash flow they need to sustain their lifestyle. And this is really important to me because when I did get divorced, I didn't know all of these things. I just got served a notice saying, disclose your financials. What is that? I don't have financials because I was basically a stay-at-home mom. So I had to figure this all out on my own. But I love helping people untangle this. So my role is basically to develop a relationship with people if I don't already have one, get to know you, what matters to you, what kind of lifestyle you want to live, and what it's going to take to sustain that going forward through a separation and divorce. It helps you go to your legal team and work on your property division and your asset division. It also helps you have the confidence to sit in those meetings and hear the other side, because sometimes it's really hard. And it also helps prevent financial abuse, in my opinion, because it gives you that backbone where you know you're going to be okay because you know what you need, you know where it's going to come from. Once we have the calculation for spousal support or child support, we can start building a financial plan for you. So that helps you also see that your future can be very bright and gives you that control. So I'm just going to flip through these. I'm not going to read you the stats. I'm going to share them with you after. But the stats on females who work with an advisor through the process of divorce and who don't are staggering. So people who don't work with an advisor while they're getting separated or divorced, they often experience a lot more anxiety. They drag their feet. They don't take their steps forward because the fear holds you back. So once you face it and take the bandage off, go face first in and understand your numbers for yourself, it gives you that ability to really move forward and take those next steps. So these I will share with you after. It is for your power. So it's about your confidence. That's the biggest thing I see when I work with people going through a divorce. And I often work with women. That's just been my journey so far. We do have couples in the questions coming up where we work with both parties, but I'll explain that. It's really important to me that you can know that you don't have to have a lot of money to build a good net worth in your future. As long as you have a plan to move forward, you know that you're making progress. And it doesn't have to be constant. Your net worth doesn't have to constantly climb through the whole process. Sometimes our net worth has to go down. Sometimes we have to make hard choices, downsize a residence. There's lots of things that we have to do to get to the next stage. But when you have a picture and a plan, it really helps you make sure that you're making the right choice for you. So this is the steps that we often will go through. The middle one is a financial plan. The first one is just the basic cash flow. That's that whole piece. What do I need right now to stay whole? What do I need to keep moving forward in the process, to hire a lawyer, to hire a divorce coach? What do I need to start saving money, paying down debt, if there is any? Is there any risk in my plan? This is something I love talking about, and I don't know if you put these in your agreements, but I will often say to somebody, okay, great. You're going to get child support for this amount of time, and you're going to get spousal support for this amount of time. what happens if your spouse passes away? Are you going to be the beneficiary on life insurance? I hope so. And you can have that in your agreement. What happens if your spouse can no longer work? So they're still alive. So they have financial needs, but they aren't working. So now they can't pay all of these obligated payments. Do they have disability insurance? We need to know that, and we need to protect you from that. And how do you protect yourself from that? We want to make sure that you only rely on the known. That's how I operate. We know you're going to get this, and it's protected. If it's great, if you get extra, you can build a plan. It's wonderful. We also look to make you tax efficient. So I have seen many times where a spouse will come into my office very concerned because since the child was born, I don't have RSPs anymore. Well, if RSPs were accumulated during a marriage, you are entitled to some of those. And they want to contribute. But if your income is not high, sometimes that's not very good for you. So we look to make sure that you're not doing things like putting money that's not very highly taxed into a taxable vehicle. We want to make sure that in the long run, you get to spend the most of your money in the most efficient manner so that you're not saving money, not getting anything for that savings, and then paying tax on it later. That's something that I see quite often, and it really kind of irritates me a little bit. Yeah, the learning about investments piece is a journey. So a lot of times, and I think this is changing, but it's still very common where the husband or the man in the relationship is the person who deals with the investments. It's just common. It's changing, but it's still quite common. That's why I asked Alex to join us today. Thank you. So I really want to help women work with other women that can help them learn how to invest their money. I want them to take charge, know that what they're saving their money in, what it can do for them, what are the risks, and they don't have to invest the same way that their spouse was investing. You get to make those choices now. This is very freeing for you. You get to decide if you're taking risk with your future. And if you do want to take risk with your future, you're going to feel good about it because you're going to understand it. And I think that's really important. And it doesn't have to stay the same. It's a journey. So I often will say, if you've never invested before, let's start with something very easy to understand, very simple. It's not going to shoot the lights out, but you're not going to lose your money. And then we kind of evolve into different strategies as you get more comfortable. And then the estate piece, which you really kind of shocked me there. Divorce does take time. So hopefully you're divorced and your estate becomes your choice. Things like having your will done and making it make sense to you. Can you read your will? Does what it says in there make complete sense to you? Do you understand it? Is everything going where it's supposed to go? Do all of your beneficiary designations on other products that the will does not cover, do those line up? Is your ex still listed as a beneficiary on something? I was reviewing a file very recently, and it was a gentleman, and I said, "Oh, who is this person on your group plan beneficiary?" "Oh, we broke up 12 years ago." I think
Awesome.
your spouse and your kids would be very upset if I had to help them make that claim. So I really try hard to review that all with you during the process to make sure that your designations make sense. And sometimes it does make sense when it's your ex because there is considerations for children or other agreements in place. But sometimes it really doesn't. So I just want to make sure that we touch on that. I often get asked how much I cost, which I think is a common thread for all three of us up here. Or I get I don't have enough money to have a financial advisor, but our job is to help you have more money. That is our number one job, and we should be compensated only to get you more money or protect your assets. But I have different levels of fees based on what we're doing together. So there are times when costs can be embedded in the things that you need. So if you come to me and you just need some life insurance, I will tell you that I get paid by the company to do life insurance. And I will tell you how much it is. You don't have to cut me a check. But if you want a full financial plan and you want to take that plan and you want to go to your investment person and you want to go to your other people, I will tell you that I charge upfront for that. And I set my fee based on how much time I think it's going to be. And it does range, but it can be up to $2,500 for a simple plan. If you own multiple businesses, it does change as well. There are proven studies that households who have advisors or people that have advisors, they have way more confidence, they save more money, they get to spend more of what they save because they've done it tax efficiently, they've done it with intention, and they've done it with understanding. They just have more harmonious life. Independent financial advice, I value highly. My motivation is to get you more money. I don't work for any specific company. That's not always the case if you're going to go to your bank or other institutions. They are trained to make their shareholders money often. Sometimes their products are good. Like right now, GICs are great. And I'm telling some people, just go get some. It's going to make you feel really good, right? You don't need to spend it right now. That's a guaranteed amount of money. I can't really compete with that. But I will tell you that as soon as that's coming up for renewal, they're going to be on you. So let's talk about those renewal dates and let's set a reminder right now and see what the environment is looking like and what your situation is looking like so that you can make the next step forward, because it may not remain that that's the best vehicle for you. So I try to make it about you and maximizing your money. These are the highlights I will share with you on the study that Kind of Life did. I was involved with, this is kind of what birthed this idea actually for me. I got called and asked to participate in a advisor survey on working with people who are getting divorced with a focus on women. And they were also doing research with women who have been divorced and worked with an advisor or not worked with an advisor. And it was really compelling what's come out of that. And we just started getting the information literally this afternoon. It took a little longer than I hoped. So the stats are very positive about working with an advisor. So my hope is that if you don't have one, that you can find one that you like, that you can, if it's someone you can go for lunch with and you like them, you know, if they drop an F-bomb and that's going to upset you, that's okay. You can find one who won't. I might. So I'll tell you right up front, it's happened. But you need to be able to enjoy their presence. And if you don't, if you are feeling judged, or if you are feeling like you can't tell them all of the details about your money, you shouldn't work with them. But there are some out there who are really amazing, and we can help you find one. We can help you. Brianna is up and coming with us, and we're growing our team with a focus on helping women be really financially confident and prepared. So this is one of the questions that was sent in. When should I engage a financial advisor during the process? You should get a very clear understanding in the very beginning of what you need for the lifestyle that you want to lead going forward after a separation. I think that really helps set realistic expectations. If you haven't worked, or if you are working, those are obviously going to be very different scenarios. And then we need to get the information from the lawyer on what you will actually see in terms of payments and support. Where I get tripped up sometimes is there is a lot of financial abuse, and I was the product of that. And not everybody has the support to get them over that hump. So we have compiled a list of resources that we will be emailing to everybody on our list. If that is the situation for you where you aren't having access to marital funds to get the support that you need for this process, then we will send that up to you in an email. We also help at the end, which is, we're not really in the middle is kind of the thing it doesn't really. If we are both clients, can we both stay clients? This has happened to us quite a number of times. We've worked with a family for a number of years. They've decided to no longer be married. They're both welcome to stay clients. We separate the file. Sometimes one will go find a new advisor, or we will introduce one to a new advisor. It's really situationally dependent. And then we will also try to make sure that you're not both in the office at the same time. Zoom and Teams have helped with that. What happens to support payments if my spouse dies or is disabled? So I kind of touched on this. I really want to make sure when I was getting divorced, my partner was in a risky profession. And I was really concerned that I wasn't going to see my payments if he passed away. So I wrote life insurance into our agreement, and our lawyers agreed, and there was a policy in place for that. The year after we finally canceled it, my son's almost grown up now. He had a motorcycle accident, and I thought, oh, okay. It was not great, but I thought, okay, it was legitimate. But what I didn't think of at the time, because I was so young and I was a newer advisor, was I didn't think about what if he couldn't work. right? What if he was injured? And he was injured a lot. So it really did impact things for me. And it didn't have to. We could have kind of avoided that a little bit. So this is how you can contact us.
Do
So,
we have my
Yes,
planted
I'll go back.
questions?
Yes.
Was it in the?
Excuse this while I go back.
Yes.
Sorry.
Before we sign off and go to we skipped over. Oh, we skipped over this too. Yeah, we skipped over that too.
Sorry.
That's okay.
We can go back.
Trigger
That's why
finger.
we are here.
I know. I was like, wait, did I get this wrong? Anyways, that was awesome. It's so cool to see it all come together, and I hope you guys are feeling that way too. So scramble back for a second to the emotional. So lots of talk about cost. Up front, you kind of often think, oh, okay, I've got to pay for my lawyer. There's going to be some fees. Oh my gosh, one more thing. And I think what hopefully is becoming a little bit more clear is that hiring a coach at this rate, and there's lots of different ways to look at that, will actually, along with the strategies that Madison discussed, save you money in the long run. And here's why. All that preparation for meetings that you want to go into happens with your coach. All of that emotional regulation happens with your coach. So I'll give you an example. Back in the day when I first stepped into a lawyer's office when I was in the middle of my divorce, I thought that they were going to have all the answers. I had no idea what I was doing. I was a complete shell of myself. There was a lot of financial abuse and post-separation abuse that I was experiencing, but at that stage, I thought, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to go into the lawyer's office and everything's going to be okay. And this lawyer at the time was like, okay, so you've given me a bit of your story, but what are your instructions? And I was like, I thought you were going to tell me. And so all that to say, it's really critical to kind of be who you are and where you're at emotionally, whatever you're dealing with it, whether or not there is abuse, whether or not you need some skills to communicate with your ex, and whether or not you need to stay clear so that you actually can look at what you need to go into the lawyer's office with happens with me. And it has shown that you're going to save money in the long run by being very prepared. And I know it helps Madison do her job when you show up prepared and or know that all of that emotional stuff that, Madison doesn't, she loves dealing with it. Just kidding. But she's very good at dealing with it. But really, we deal with it, allows her to stay focused on her job and gives you that sense of knowing that there's somewhere to go to after you fall apart or something doesn't go well, or you need to really think that through, or that whole experience might be emotional, right? So all of that ends up in Madison's office, and now we're peeling back the layers. And oftentimes Madison will say, go talk to Heidi and then come back so that we can do exactly that, unpack what's really going on, whether there is coercive control and abuse, and how we're going to respond to that with you as a person, and then how you go into those rooms and those meetings to be able to do what you need to get done.
Can I say something?
We had the difference between.
Okay. One thing that Heidi is extremely good at is distilling the information that I will receive from a client, or that any lawyer, because you work with a lot of lawyers, will receive. So I can think of one situation where I went into a meeting with the client and I got a ton of information. And then the client went away, spoke with Heidi, came back and told me 3 points. And those 3 points were actually all of the information that I needed in order to prepare the court application. So what you're excellent at is distilling that information, knowing what the judges or what the law looks at, and then having that client come back with those specific pieces of information.
Gee, thanks.
You're welcome.
But I think that's really critical, and it's really hard to do. And sometimes you want to go in with all your information, and you just need that person to say, here's what they're going to ask, here's what you need to go in with, and the rest will follow, and you have to trust and know that you're caught by your team. And so it does help everybody when that happens.
Do you want to talk about the differences between you two?
I think we kind of have.
Right.
Yeah, we're good.
And then the questions. Do you want me to read them to you?
I think you just answered that
I can do
question.
that. What are some suggestions to emotionally prepare? Oh boy. Okay. Well, number one, really think about your needs holistically as a person. If you're extremely emotional, that's okay. But how are you going to manage that? It is an emotional time. If your kids are extremely emotional, that's okay. How are you going to manage? So, number one, be really honest with yourself and what you think you might need, because that, again, is going to get you to where you need to be and achieve those goals of the long run. So, think about what is happening for you and what you might need. And then you add in the resources that can help you either emotionally regulate for meetings with your lawyer, emotionally regulate for potential meetings with your former spouse, emotionally regulate to tackle your daily life, which seems to go on the back burner. And you end up being in survival mode if you're not giving yourself permission to actually feel what you're feeling and deal with what you're dealing. So assemble your network of and community of support and really be honest with yourself. And it's okay to ask for help in those moments that you're feeling less than, overwhelmed, and scared. And, in situations where you're being coerced to think that it's going to be a certain way, all of that erodes all of your emotional bandwidth. And so to emotionally prepare yourself, it's to start where you are and really think about what you might need emotionally. Get yourself a therapist. Really think about who in your personal sphere can actually support you. And that's not giving you the space to be able to be supported, not have to support them about you, if that makes sense, right? There's lots of situations where all of a sudden you're like, am I actually explaining everything to you and using energy? And aren't you supposed to be supporting me? And it's okay. Lots of people don't know how to do that, but really think about that, those close people. Give yourself permission to know that you don't have to report it to anybody. You can make a plan about that and know that going into these meetings and or proceedings and or having to deal with information and or decision making that's really emotional is going to be hard. So how do you move forward and know that you can pace it as you need to pace it? And give yourself permission to just breathe when things throw you for a tailspin. And I can think of someone in this room that we do a lot of that, where it's like we're just gonna stay here for a second and know that this is where we need to go, but from this point at your pace. So it's really critical to just get in touch with yourself and know that it's okay if you're a complete basket case. It's okay if you're totally fried, and how you're going to move forward. And know that it's going to take some emotional strength and support from others to be able to tackle these steps in a paced way. I think I kind of covered that.
Should I go to a mediator first?
Oh, this is such a good one. And I think we might tag team on this one. But I get a lot of, when people come to me at the beginning, they've kind of, the questions I get or the thoughts they have, here's where I'll go. Well, we've hired a mediator, so we should be good, right? Okay. Should you hire a mediator first? No. Should you sort yourself out and the situation and then make clear decisions about which arena is going to be the best for you? Yes. And I think the mediator example is a really good one because it is a profession where you have lawyers that are mediators, which I recommend. We have individuals that are mediators that are not lawyers, which are also out there, and that's great. But you really have to be very discerning as to why you're hiring a mediator, who you're hiring, and what road it's going to go down. So that takes it back to, no, you shouldn't hire a mediator first. People often will hire a mediator first because they think that the mediator is going to just make them the best collaborative couple on the planet to consciously uncouple. And no mediator and or collaborative process is going to make you collaborative if you're not collaborative. And or if you really want to be collaborative and you're actually sane and stable and making good decisions, and you can't control your spouse, but you've picked the mediation arena or you've picked the collaborative arena with hopes that he will or she will become collaborative. That's not the answer either. So the step back is, before you do anything, just look at your situation with eyes wide open. And that's why there are people like me out there who can help you do that. And then you make your decisions. And sometimes those decisions are made for you. I have lots of clients who are in situations that the spouse is driving the bus on the process and who they're going to use. And we also can unpack that by helping you with what you can control in those situations. So should you hire a mediator first? No. Does a mediator make it all perfect and good and even? Definitely not. That's not their job. Their job is there to guide your conversation and your decision-making and your process. Is that appropriate for you? Who really knows right off the hop? So it's really critical, again, to just take that step back from your situation with eyes wide open and look at it with support, because it is very emotional.